Hello, Lizzie here. Today I'm going to show you how to make a Margot. A Margot is this beautiful cushion here with the fabulous flying geese and the super ties that are on the end here. Now this could be used in your home. It could be used in your caravan or your motorhome as like a nice accent piece. You could obviously choose your fabrics to suit your decor, but it's just a lovely project that I think you're going to really enjoy making. And I love the fact that we've got a little bit of patchwork on the front. I love it, really love it. I love the fact that we've got this kind of faux piping here that kind of breaks up the design between the flying geese section and the end section there. But it's a very neat design, it really is, and it's designed by Kath, and I have the great pleasure of doing the video for you. So if we look at the, I'm going to pop it behind me, so let's pop her over there. There we go. And if we have a look at the pattern, this is what you'll see. You might have a different front cover. I might do another photograph of this yet, but that's what the front cover looks like. So if you're looking for Margot on the website, then that's the sort of design you're going to be looking for. You're going to be looking for the cushion, let's be honest here, rather than the background. But yeah, so that's what we're going to make today. It's a really lovely make, so I think you'll all enjoy it very much indeed. And as I said, this is called Margot. Now in the instructions, everything is there, all the picture diagrams, all the notes on how to do everything, a really good step-by-step. I think there's about 23 step-by-steps that Kath has done for this pattern, and obviously all the cutting instructions as well. So we'll go through that one at a time, and I'll have this in front of me here. I say this every time, I'll follow the pattern and then I go off piste, but I do my best. So if we have a look on the overhead, you can see straight away that these are the first pieces that we need to make the flying geese. So you're going to cut yourself a square, and all of this is in the instructions, and then you're going to cut 4 little squares, and that's what makes up the flying geese, the sort of side bits. This is going to be the middle bit, and these are going to be your side bits. It's the only way I can describe it, really. And this technique of making flying geese is pretty well known, I think, but it's good to go over it again. And you can make all 4 at the same time, which is fabulous. So I'm pinning down my 2 squares opposite sides. Now I do like to pin these so they stay nice and straight. You might be okay with just doing this freehand. You know, it's down to you, isn't it, how you feel about it. So then we're going to draw a line straight through the middle diagonally. So you can see my ruler doesn't quite fit, so I'm going to get my larger ruler out. Let's get that ready. And that was an 8.5 inch ruler. So it just shows how you think, oh yeah, that'll be fine, and it's not fine at all. So we're drawing a line through the centre. You can use your heat erasable pen, you can use just a regular pen, because you're not going to see this line at all, and obviously it's easier without the pins, but we'll try and get that mark on there. It's not coming up very well, perhaps my pen's running out, but we got a diagonal line going from corner to corner. We're going to pop this under the sewing machine and we're going to sew either side. So we're going to sew 1/4 inch here and 1/4 inch there, and then we'll cut through the middle and give that a little press. So I'll get my iron on ready. We can bring the machine in. Now I would keep your stitch length 2.5. I mean, if it's a bit of patchwork, you could take it down to 2 or 2.2, but I think you'll be fine with 2.5. Right, so let's stitch this. I'm using a walking foot for no particular reason. I've been enjoying using it lately, so it's been on my machine a lot. Just be mindful of your seam allowance. Do make sure it is 1/4 inch. It would be easy to do a little bit too big. So all the way down. Nice and slowly. No need to rush. So if we look on the overhead again, that's my sewn couple of sort of little blocks here, so we'll just take the pins out. Now you can use your scissors or you can use your rotary cutter. Well, I don't have my cutting mat on the table, so I'm just going to use my scissors and just cut down the centre. This is only your seam allowance, so you don't have to be super duper careful with it. So scissors are fine. So you end up with two pieces that look like that. Then we need to press those out. So let's get the pressing mat. And we're just going to press the seams out and then just push them away. Now you could of course do it the other way, so you could have it, so let me just take that back again. So you could pop that on the top and push the seams away from your triangles there. See if I can do that. There we go, that's a bit better. So it makes a really nice neat job. So you need to do that with both of them. Lovely, lovely fabric, really lovely. So push them away, push them away. Always go to the centre first and then out to the sides. And like I say, you can set your seam if you want to. So just get the heat on there, make sure it's behaving. Okay, don't think that was quite up to the full heat. So now we put the second square on. So we just line these up. This time I'm not going to pin it, so I can get my ruler nice and flat. So it's right sides together on both pieces. Beautiful. And then we just draw down the centre of that piece. There we go. Now we can pop a pin in just to secure it. These things do have a habit of wriggling. And once again we're going to stitch 1/4 inch either side of that line that we've drawn. So draw a second line there, pop our pins in, and then we're going to stitch again either side of the line that we've drawn. And it's always a 1/4 inch seam allowance unless I say otherwise. So pop it on the machine. One done. Lovely. So if we go to the overhead again, take the pins out. And we can just take our scissors and cut down the centre. Now I thought with mine, because of the fabrics that I've chosen, you'll see in a little while why I'm saying this. I'm going to use this in the garden as a kneeler. I need a kneeler these days. I can't just kneel down, I need a little bit of softness. So I thought this would be great for that. And because of that, I'm not going to put PVC on the back, but you could put PVC on the back so it becomes waterproof. Or you can coat with Eau de Coat if you like that sort of thing, and create a waterproof backing to your cushion. And I think that would be lovely as a kneeler, I really do. So if we look at the overhead, all I'm doing now is setting my seam of that second part and just pushing that away, and you'll see that we've made a lovely flying goose. Goose or flying geese? What would you say? I would say goose because it's one, but I think we still have to say a flying geese if we want to be perfectly accurate. Okay. So I'll just turn the iron off now. So we just need to trim these back. And just going over to the pattern now. Let's have a look. We need to trim the blocks down. So we've given them a nice press. So I'm going to get my cutting mat and we're going to trim them down. So I'll use my 8.5 inch now. So let me just check the pattern. When it's not your pattern, it's something that you need to check all the time. And so I really appreciate you guys when you're making up one of my patterns. I really understand how you would go through the same process as I'm going through now, creating somebody else's pattern. So let's have a look. Okay. So I'm just going to pop my 1/4 inch mark there. So I'll get on and do this so I don't hold you up. And all I'm doing is trimming back as the pattern says. And you can understand that by reading the pattern. It's very clear of how you trim these back. But I'll carry on doing this. And then I'll come back to you when I've done them all. So now I have trimmed all my flying geese, I can now stitch them together to make one long strip. If you remember, if I get out of the way, you remember what we're making? We're making this strip of 4 here. So you need to get them so they're going all the same way. So get all your points lined up on your desk before you start sewing, and we're going to just stitch these together to make one long strip, sticking to your 1/4 inch seam allowance. And just to make sure that you do keep to that, it's good to have the join of your previous block underneath, or on top I should say, so you can see where to go through the point. So you're just going slightly, just a hair's breadth on the inside of that seam. So if we look at the side camera there, by going right to the inside of that join, we get a lovely point. And that should happen to you every time. So again, we'll put these together. We'll make sure that our point, if you like, so we look on the side camera again, we're looking at this part here, and we're just going on where it meets, where it kisses, we're just going on the right of that join there. I wouldn't worry too much if you don't get that perfect point. So let's have a look again. It's a nice feeling if you do get it right, but it's not desperately important. By the time you've made your cushion, you'll be thrilled. So just enjoy the process. Okay, so we'll just give that a little press. So it's a dry iron all the time. I think once you've made the whole thing up, then you can use your steam iron if you want to. And what I would do is, you've got to decide whether you're going to put the points that way or your edge of your seams that way, so this folds over. But I prefer to have it so this is perfect, and this is going to be in the seam allowance anyway when we join the sides up. So let's switch the iron on, that would be handy. It's doing a good job though, it does retain the heat. So let's just push those over, and again, if you wanted to, Now that seam perhaps should go the other way, but let's go with it for the moment. I want to push it that way. There we go, much happier with that. And then what you can do is fold it over, flip it over, and then iron from the other side. Just make sure that's all beautiful and neat. So that's what you'll see at the end of the day. You want it as best you can. So you can see I'm not hurrying, I'm enjoying the stitching, I'm enjoying the process. Such pretty fabric. It's by Poppy. So I think it's one of their latest designs, and this is March 2024. Okay, so let's look at the pattern again. So we're going to have it so our triangles, our geese are going the right way, and then we need to add on top and bottom. Now then, I've got directional fabric, and this is intentional. It's all part of the range. I love it. So you've got to decide whether your two directional pieces, if you decide to use directional, are going to go that particular way, or if they're going to go out like that one and then maybe out on that one. So it's facing out that way and it's facing out that way. That way it can be done, you can have the cushion anyway, but we have got the ties on the right hand side, so maybe the cushion will always be with the ties on the right hand side. I don't know, it's open to interpretation, isn't it? So we could have it so they all go that way. I think I'll stick with that actually. That gives me great pleasure. So these side pieces here, these are the side borders, sorry, the top and bottom borders. I do beg your pardon, top and bottom borders, and then we've got a side border here, so that's going to go on too. So we're going to stitch these onto here, and then we'll stitch our side border on. So we can just pin those in place. As I say, all the measurements are in the pattern. So just pop a couple of pins in just to hold. Do the same for the other side. And if you get it so your pin heads are facing out, it's just easier to take them out when you're stitching. So 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down. Make sure your fabrics are all sitting nicely on top of each other. And do a little back stitch just to hold that securely. Now if you've given your flying geese a nice press, all the seams should stay exactly where you want them to be. Little back stitch just to hold it. It should be fine because we're going to stitch it that end certainly onto the side border. Just make sure those seams are sitting nicely. If they do flip, you can just unpick that little bit and redo that just that little bit. Okay. So once again, we'll give this a press. It's really important that you go through all of these processes of pressing, because it will give your cushion a really nice professional finish. So just push those out. Loving these fabrics together. Really loving it. So pretty. Very spring-like. I feel like getting out into the garden now. So it won't be long. So just push those out, get that nice and crispy. Right, let's turn that down a wee bit. Okay, so now we're going to stitch the side border on. And this goes on to the left hand side. So once you've done your seam allowances, you can see that it all fits in really nicely. At first you think, oh, it's not going to fit, but it does, because you've taken 1 inch off in seam allowances. So now we're just going to pop that onto there and pop a couple of pins in just to hold it. And again, if you pop the pin heads out to the let's just get that lined up a bit better. If out to your right, then they're easy to take out when you're stitching. Okay. So we're just going to stitch down there, 1/4 inch seam allowance. And to do a back stitch again, just to hold it. Just make sure those raw edges are sitting nicely. Excellent. So, just press that seam out now. So we'll set that seam again. So the stitches go really nicely into the fabric. Makes it lie nice and flat. Flip it over and give it a press. When we come to putting the H630 on, the very lightweight stabiliser, it's like like a wadding batting. It's a very lightweight one. We can do a little bit of quilting, not much, doesn't need it, so just a little bit. Okay. So now what we need to do is get our cushion front so it's sitting the right way again, and we're going to put the flange on down here. Now that is tucked in my work here somewhere. There we go. It's a tiny little slither of fabric, but I think what you probably do best, it would be to fold this in half and give it a press. So this is going to be like your faux binding really. So you're only going to have a little bit that you can see, but it kind of just breaks it up. I really like the effect of it. But giving it a press really helps make it look really neat and tidy. So all we're going to do is pop this down that side there and stitch it onto our project. So this is like a temporary stitch really. So you could lengthen your stitch if you want to. Okay, that's that little job done. So we've attached that just on the top there. So we have attached our little flange on the side of our cushion front, so that's on the right hand side, just making sure that our little flying geese are going all the right way still. I haven't pressed it because I'm now going to put our big background piece on, which is this piece here, so it matches this. You don't have to do it so it matches, and you need to put it, so I'm just going to make sure I've got the right size going onto it. There we go, because it's not a square, it's a rectangle. So you need to now put right sides together with this and pin that in place and stitch a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down. So we'll just pop a pin in a few places just to hold it. So by basting the flange down, the faux binding piping, it means that everything is secure. Okay, so we've pinned it, let's stitch it. Okay. So this is where you do really need to keep this accurate now. I'm going to do a little back stitch. Make sure your raw edges are all sitting nicely on top of each other. And because we've put that binding on, it should all be nice and straight. Stitch to finish. There we are. So we just move the machine out of the way. So now we have put our flange in, we've attached our large background piece of fabric, and you can mix and match these as much as you like. In the pattern it tells you where to mark on your fabric as to where you place your straps. So we need 2 straps. Now when you come to do the straps, you're cutting 4, and you're going to be folding them in half lengthwise and doing a seam. So the seam starts from here to there and across. You're leaving this end as a raw edge. So you need 4 of those, and I've already pre-done those. So where I've marked on the background here where my straps are going to go, could have been ironed a little bit better. I'm going to put my strap just inside that mark. Now I'm not going to pin there, I'm going to pin just along here, so it just holds it in place. The same with this one. So let's just pop that in there like that. So you're going on the inside line of your mark there. So there's your mark, and you're placing your strap on that line there. So let's just make sure that sits nicely. I'm just going to pop my iron on that just to make sure. There we go. Got water coming out of there, but that's fine. And you're going to pin those just a little way back from that vertical line there, because what we're going to do is flip this over, and we're going to encase those straps into that line. So if you look on your fabric and get that so it's sitting absolutely on top of your straps, and you can feel them, and you can pop a pin in now, and then you're going to stitch all the way along here at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and that'll then encase your straps into your cushion. So let's do that. So just make sure everything is sitting in the perfect place, and you can iron this so you've got a nice crease line. When you come to the pin, do take it out. Okay. Lovely. So you can see now that I've encased my straps into my cushion front, and when I fold that back, the straps are attached, and I can take those pins out now, and this piece here can then go to the back of the work. Okay, so let's go on to the next stage. Okay, so now I have stitched my straps in place. So you can see they're caught into that seam allowance there. We now need to cover this entire thing with H630, and just up to the seam line. When I say the entire thing, just up to the seam line there. And you need to do this from the cotton side. So I would place your H630 down, and if you need to, you could pop a pin in and just hold that in place temporarily. But if you're careful, if you fit it one side, especially if you line it up to the side, then you'll be fine. And we'll just get our lovely iron and just adhere that down. Just take your time with it. So you only put the H630 up to the seam line where you just put the straps in. So it doesn't go all the way along. In the instructions, the patterns are there, so, sorry, in the pattern, the instructions are there of what to cut. And it doesn't take long to adhere this to your lovely patchwork piece. Right, so let me just turn this. So just make sure that you're pressing your faux piping the right way. You might need to trim your wadding, which is fine. So I think we've just about adhered that down. I'm happy with that. It doesn't take long with the H630, it doesn't take long. So I'll just turn that down a wee bit. Okay, So now we've got it in that state, we can now attach our inner lining, and the inner lining will kind of cover up your workings really. So that's your H630 on the back, and the inner lining, which is a really lovely long piece, I've used Egyptian cotton the same as Kath, that's going to now be stitched on. So if we put this flat on the desk again and put our straps over here, and that seam can be pressed out, I'm now going to put right sides together, and we're going to stitch on this far right hand seam, nothing else, just that. So let's pop our pieces together, and we're going to stitch 1/4 inch seam allowance just down that one side there. Going to go ahead and press that, so I'll come back to you when I've done that. So I have stitched the seam, I folded it back so it covers the H630 on the back, and I've pressed it well. So if we have a look at how it looks now, there's my straps all encased into that seam we did. This is the seam we've just stitched, so if I flip this over you can see that my lining goes all the way over and it covers the H630 there. And what I've done is I've used some temporary spray, fabric spray, to adhere that together so it stays put. So now what we can do is a little bit of quilting on the front of our cushion here. I'm not going to do much, it doesn't really need it. So I'm going to go down this side seam here, and I'm just going to go down these two side seams here. I'm not going to worry too much about burying my ends of my threads. I'm just going to do a tiny little back stitch. You can increase your stitch length if you want to 3. I'm using the edge of my foot, my walking foot, as a guide. So these are the parts where I'm not going to worry about burying my threads. Obviously if this is something that concerns you, then please do that, but I'm just going to do 2 or 3 little back stitches almost on the spot, and then come all the way along. And when I reach the flange, I'm just going to again do 1 little stitch backwards and forwards. You can hardly see it, but you must do whatever you're comfortable with. So that's that done. So any threads we can trim away, keep it all lovely and neat. And when you do put your lining on the back of here, then just remember to, if it needs trimming, trim it. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is to fold back our top here. So this is the seam that we did just earlier on. So I'm now going to fold that back along this seam line here. So if I flip it over and take it to my seams, and this is where the straps come in handy because I can just pull my seam out using them, and you want to get that really in the right place. So I'm just going to pop a pin in there just to hold it. So pretty, isn't it? And if after all this stitching and applying of fabrics and layers you need to trim and make this really neat and tidy, please do that. Okay, so the next stage now is to do the back of the cushion. So we do it almost identically to how we did the front, not all the patchwork, don't worry, but the folding in of the straps to make that lovely, nice, neat seam and nice, secure straps. So I've obviously got my straps already made, and I've already marked out on my fabric where the straps should lay, and again it tells you exactly in the pattern what the measurements are. I'm just going to pin those so they don't wriggle, and I've placed them so they're right on the edge of my line. You probably can't see this line, but it goes all the way down here, and I've made my measurements here as well. Now these measurements are slightly different to what we did on the front, so please refer to the pattern to get that bit right. Then I'm going to fold it back and do that 1/4 inch seam just as we did before. So fold it back, make sure that your straps are sitting straight and flat so you can feel them underneath the fabric. And you can always measure that again, so get your ruler out and measure that distance between the raw edge here and the fold here, just to make sure you have got that in the right place. And then I'm going to pop a pin in top and bottom here. Seem to be running out of pins here. And of course what you could do if you wanted to, if you're not sure, is to get your iron and just give that a little crease, just to make sure that you have got that lovely and straight and parallel. So let's pop it under the machine. 1/4 inch seam allowance. Just make sure that when you get to your straps they're sitting straight. We've pinned them so it should be fine. Trust the process, as they say. Again, make sure that strap is sitting straight. Okay, so if we look on the overhead again, take the pins out. You can hear Millie. I think she's seen a burglar. So there is our straps attached into our seam there, so we can just flip those back. Before we do that, we need to actually stitch this seam here so it's nice and neat. So let's stitch that end seam. So it's the short end where your straps are. We're just going to fold over a 1/4 inch, fold over a 1/4 inch again, and then stitch, making that really nice and neat. And of course you can press this, you can pin it, whatever is easiest for you. Honestly, on these sort of seams, just folding as you go is usually just as easy. So there we are, so there's our seam done, where we've just stitched it down 1/4 inch over first, fold again, and then top stitch. And then all we're going to do is fold that back, get our straps out of the way, and give that a press. So let me bring my ironing pad up. So what you need to do is just to make sure that the seam is well turned out there, and make sure this stays parallel to your raw edge there. Pop a pin in if you want to. Press your seam as well that you've just stitched. And then just make sure that seam is out. I'm just going to move that out. I mean, setting the seam actually helps very much with making sure that your edge is sitting nicely, but the main thing is to make sure that these raw edges here are sitting neatly together, which they are, so that's lovely. Okay, so now it's just a case of stitching the two together. We're going to do a French seam, so we're going to do wrong sides together first. Sometimes that kind of plays with your mind a little bit. Now, what I would do with your straps is actually pin these out of the way. So you could use a safety pin or a regular pin, but please be careful. Make sure that A, they don't get caught in all the seams, but also that you don't hurt yourself with the pins. So, but I'm just going to tuck them under, and I'm going to get a nice long pin and pin them to my flaps. I'm just going to pin those in place as well. So don't forget we're doing wrong sides together first, and as I say, sometimes it kind of blows your mind a bit because you think that can't be right. So it's wrong sides together, and we're going to stitch around the 3 sides. So we're going to stitch from this top here all the way around the 3 sides there. Now because we're working with layers, this is where I'll bring my quilting clips in. Because now we've got layers, the quilting clips don't always feel so heavy. So we're just going to line up our top seams here. Make sure that they're beautifully lined up. Just watch all your pins that you've already previously put in. Just keep an eye on all of those. If you want to trim these edges, please go ahead and do that. I might just trim that a little bit there. And then work your way around. And whatever you've got on the top, so your front cushion, use that as your guide. But it's always useful, as I say, to trim and make sure that your cutting was accurate. So just get those popped together. So don't forget we're doing wrong sides together. Now I'm just going to get my lovely scissors and trim this a little bit here. Because our first seam is only 1/8 of an inch, and we want to make sure that that's accurate. There we go. There we go. Lovely. So I'll take those pins out, but I'll replace it with a clip like that. And the same on the other side. Let's get a clip. Keep them all together, and there we are. So let's turn it so it's still the right way for all of us. So I've clipped them all together, and I'm just now going to stitch from this top right hand corner all the way around and finish at the bottom right hand corner. Then we're going to turn it through and finish off our French seam with a nice 1/4 inch seam allowance. So let's go and do that. Just make sure that first little bit is lined up. And oftentimes I'll start a 1/4 inch away, go reverse off the work and then come back on again so it stays nicely positioned. Now we want to make sure we're catching all the layers. And if you're not confident, then stitch a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch, and then you can always trim back. Make sure it's all flat. So just make sure as you're going round that you're adjusting and making sure you're catching all of the layers, especially when you get to the flaps. Make sure everything's lined up. Adjust if you need to. Make sure that your ends are sitting right on top of each other as well. So that's gone all the way around. I'm pretty happy with what I've stitched. Good job. So I'm going to trim this. Sometimes we just trim just to take off little threads, because when we do the next seam, if you've got threads there, sometimes you see them poking out. So you can trim them back, but sometimes it's nice just to go around now and neaten all of those off, and just cut back a little bit. So I'm just going to go all the way around. So really I'm taking it down, not to a 1/16 of an inch, but somewhere in between an 1/8 and a 1/16, which means we're getting rid of any frayed fabric, any threads, and just making sure that when we do that second seam, it's the best it can possibly be. But don't go too near, you're just trimming. So now we've done our 1/8 of an inch all the way around and trimmed it, we need to turn the cushion through to the other side, so right side's facing now, which seems a lot more comfortable. So just push your corners through. If you need to use a tool to push these through, then use something that's not too sharp, because it's a vulnerable seam there, because we've only got a little bit of an 1/8 of an inch seam, so it's very vulnerable. Okay, so now we need to do the French seam. We're ready to do the French seam, and this is how it looks. So you've got the pockets, the little flaps, both sides looking like this. And what you need to do now is take the front flap, which is this one here, over to the back. Okay, so we're taking it over to the back. So just pop your hand inside, just grab hold of something and just push that through. And again, you might need to push these corners out. So again, get hold of something so you can got a bit of leverage and take it through. So let's have a look at it this way so I can get my hands in there. And you're just going to watch your straps again. Just keep them tucked out of the way. We don't want to stitch those into our seam. And now we've got the front flap right over to the back, so it's touching the wrong side of the backing fabric. If we have a look at what we've got here, we've got the backing fabric and its flap, and then we've got the front flap here coming over, so we've kind of enveloped it over. If I flip this back again, this is what you should see on the right side. So on the front, that's all you should see, your lining fabric and obviously your little bit of quilting, if you've done any. So now it's just a case of doing the French seam all the way around. So make sure these corners are well poked out as best you can. I would give this a press so it's nice, the seam is nice and sharp, and I would now just pop this under your machine. Use a walking foot if you can, and like I say, try and get in there with something so you can poke those corners out. Make sure the straps are right out of the way, and we're going to do our French seam. So a little bit of a back stitch just to start. Make sure all your seams are lined up, and off we go. Take your time. You can lengthen the stitch if you want to. But now we've pressed everything, it makes it really easy. I'm using the width of my foot here to stitch my seam. There we go. into that corner. It's also sometimes difficult to judge that 1/4 inch, but you won't be far out. When you come to the flap, just make sure it's laying flat, and you could get your stiletto or your I sometimes use an unpicker because it's got a nice sharp point, just to guide that under. And come up to the corner again. Make sure your straps are out of the way because they're just tucked in there. There they are, just tucked in there. So hopefully we haven't caught them. So come right up to the top. Nice little back stitch there, and then we can turn it through. So take the, let's just trim that little thread there, take the front flap back over. Don't forget we're going to poke all the corners out, make it all lovely and neat. Just pull it, that'll open the seam up beautifully, and then we're just going to turn it through. And again, once we turn it through, you need to push those corners out. And if you've trimmed your fabric, let's get a nice little pokey tool here. If you've trimmed your fabric, you shouldn't have many little threads sticking out of your seam, but you can just give it a little haircut if you have. There's no worries. Okay, so just push those corners out. So just give it a press, and that is our cushion done. We just need to put a cushion pad in, but for speed I'll do up my straps. Lovely big bows, beautiful. Really lovely to have the fabric as bows on the side, really pretty. Make sure they're all nicely presented. Press it again and you're good to go. So that is my version of Margot, which I think's gorgeous. Loving the fabric from Poppy, and pretty flowery fabric on the back as well. All we need to pop in there is as a cushion, as I say. And if you wanted to, you can now eau-de-coat perhaps the back of the fabric here, so it will go nicely on the garden if you wanted to use it as a kneeler. Or maybe you just need a kneeler for getting in your bottom cupboards in your room. I know I do. Whatever the case, it's going to make a beautiful, beautiful cushion for you. As you can see with the one behind me that our lovely Kath made, in an equally as beautiful fabric, and the back is green. Now, I haven't got quite a big enough pillow in here, but you get the idea. Isn't that absolutely gorgeous? So you can go perhaps bright and bold like Kath, or you could go perhaps more sort of ditzy print like me. Whatever the case, you're going to make the most beautiful Margot, and I hope to see loads.